talking today a little bit about how fiction can become reality. Vince Flynn is the author of many books and the author of Term Limits, which is how old? When did you write this? You started writing this in 90.
Started in 92.
Yeah, I mean, he's so wrong in this thing. He's like, the deficit is out of control. Our debt, 92, our debt is almost $5 trillion. And I'm like, ooh, whoa, scary. That would be a dream come true today. Yeah, exactly. Yaron Brook is here. He is the president of the Ayn Rand Institute as well. Good to see you again. I wanted to bring you two on because you're contemporary, and a lot of people do it. DeMille does it, Brad Thor does it, and you are really the one representing Ayn Rand at this point. When did she write Fountainhead, or Atlas Shrugged?
53 years ago. 53
years ago. If I meet one more person who said, oh my gosh, I just read Ayn Rand, I love this one. Glenn, have you ever read Atlas Shrugged? I'm like, yes, yeah. I have. They're like, Dad, a friend gave it to me. It's all happening. I'm like, yes. But your book is Term Limits. I got to tell you, Vince, what I know how both administrations, this last administration and this administration, especially after 9/11, what happened was they asked these guys to go in and get them, get the bad guys. Yep. And then they have abandoned them. I mean, here are the big CIA guys, even some of the FBI guys. All of these people have gone out, military. Go ahead.
Well, the premise for the book is it's a little frightening, and it had to be my first book. I don't know if I have the guts to write it today.
Oh, I wouldn't.
But
that's insane.
You know, the weird thing about this book is everybody reads it and then they say, I was laying there one night and I realized I'm cheering for the bad guys.
Bad guys.
I don't want to give away the whole thing, but basically...
I do. My book's for sale. Don't buy this book. It's trite. Overton window. That's what you should...
it's runaway deficit spending. It's the same old Washington stuff. Yeah. Each party is out to take the other one down just so they can gain more power. And there's a group of spec op guys who got burned on an op because of a loudmouth senator. Big shock. These guys leak stuff all the time. And you spend a lot of time around the military, and you get that they get paid less than a DC bus driver. You know, and they have a great sense of honor and duty. And then they come home and they look at basically that Parliament of Horrors on Capitol Hill, and they say, are you kidding me? I'm off, you know, sacrificing everything I've got, laying my life on the line. I've seen my buddies get killed, and I come back and I have to watch this circus. And so that it unfolds, that all of a sudden these guys start showing up dead.
You know, that's one of the things that we're doing in Washington this summer is trying to, you know, the name of this event I'm doing is Restoring Honor. And because that's what concerns me. We have two classes in America, and really it's the military that, and not everybody, I mean, you know, they're dirtbags and everything, but there's honor there, and they see that. And then everybody else is like, whatever, just make it happen. And if you don't restore honor, you can't have the freedom that Ayn Rand had, because you have to have somebody babysitting you.
Absolutely, but there's enormous disrespect for the military out there, particularly in Washington. And it's not just that we abandoned these troops after the fact, but we sent them into combat with rules of engagement that meant suicide for many of them.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. And we've lost what it takes in this country, actually go out and win a war. And actually go out there and fight a war. And, of course, we're abandoning our allies left and right. We saw what happened with Israel last week. It's just insane. And here are these troops who are out there to defend our freedoms. And they need a lawyer in order to know whether they can shoot at the enemy.
We're giving how insulting is it to give a military guy a medal? This is the president's idea.
Oh.
Give a medal for restraint. That's just a polite way of saying, hey, baby killer, thanks for not killing any babies today, isn't it? Or am I reading that wrong?
No, you're right. I think the most glaring example is what they did to the CIA after 9/11. They basically called those guys in and said, go do whatever it takes. We want their head on a platter.
And Nancy Pelosi.
And they were all briefed. They knew what was going on. And so they went and did it. And then they come home, and I told you in the last book tour, one of my contacts, I said, what's your biggest fear? And I was expecting him to say, you know, a nuke in Manhattan or something. He said, my biggest fear is I'm going to come back and land in the States, and I'm going to see the feds waiting for me to arrest me for doing what my country asked me to do. We just no longer have that stomach anymore, at least in Washington. You know, the people who listen to your show and most people in America, they get it. They don't want to hear all the little details of what goes on. They just want some of these bad guys to disappear in the middle of the night.
I don't know if that's a good... I don't think Ayn Rand would approve of that.
I'm talking about non-U.S. citizen bad guys. You know, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda.
The cave guys.
The
cave
terrorists.
Guys. Okay, hang on just a second.
Yes.
I have to take a break. We'll be right back. I know. We're talking tonight about people who think out of the box and why it's important to think out of the box. George Orwell, he was a socialist, but he said, uh-oh, scary stuff coming our way. Here's somebody who's crazily anti-socialist communist, Ayn Rand. This thing is, it reads like a newspaper. Vince Flynn, this is from 1995, was finally published?
Self-published in 97.
In 97. It, too, reads like a newspaper. The reason why I'm talking about this tonight is because when the Berlin Wall fell, I don't know if you know this, the Soviet Union collapsed. Do you know that they actually thought that Tom Clancy was a CIA plant? I talked to Tom Clancy right after the Berlin Wall fell, and I said, so you know they thought you were a CIA guy? And he said, yeah. Yeah, they didn't believe that an insurance agent, a former insurance agent, could just write these books and get it so right. They actually thought, when they read his books, they thought that the CIA was using him for disinformation or relaying messages. So they used to sit around and say, aha, that's what they want us to think that they're doing. I mean, but he was a fiction writer. There is something to these people who use data points. And then see the future. Have you ever heard of Sigma? Sigma is an organization of sci-fi writers, most with PhDs in high-tech fields, who have either worked for government or advised the government on how to protect the nation. Homeland Security's Deputy Director of Research says the writers help managers think more broadly about projects, especially about potential reactions and unintended consequences. Good. It's common sense. It's what you do in business. Vince Flynn is here. He's the author of Term Limits, and Yaron Brook is here. He's the president of the Ayn Rand Institute. We were talking when we went into break here a second ago about the way we treat our military and everything else. I want to kind of stay kind of in that. As a data point guy, and I'd like to hear historically where Ayn Rand would stand on this, if you could piece anything together. Historically, Vince, when you look at that data point board up there with the overspending, corruption, the Marxist, no expectation of privacy in emails or privacy in location, that's a spooky one, isn't it, Yaron?
Absolutely.
Pushing away Israel and Britain, our two biggest allies. As a fiction writer, where are we headed?
That's not good. I
got that one.
I would argue.
There it is.
But I would argue. I would even make it a little more simplistic. I think if you talk to any insurance actuarial in the country, they'll just tell you based on the unfunded liabilities. That's enough right there to blow the whole thing up. And they've been saying it for 30 years. This is not. It wasn't.
No, this isn't a surprise.
Yeah.
And where you're heading here is towards ever-growing state. This is statism. This is statism is applied to all these different factions, and it's a rejection of what makes America special. You know, it's this multiculturalism, it's this egalitarian notion brought to international affairs, but also to domestic affairs. There's a whole sense in all these things of making everybody the same, treating everybody as a group.
Right.
You know, no individuals.
Well, taking care of them. Where's the? Here's the other copy of this one is highlighted. I absolutely love this. When they talk about in Ayn Rand, in Atlas Shrugged, she talks about how you know, they're going to regulate the railroad, and all these people are just nincompoops. All of the people in Congress and all the politicians are just ridiculously stupid, and they all seem like they're Barney Frank. It says here, I say, are your railroads safe? Kip Chambers says, hell yes, we've got so many rules, regulations, and controls that those bastards wouldn't dare not to be safe.